The Dish Pig. I'm your host, Nick Sherry. You know, Anthony Bourdain once said, "I'm not afraid to look like an idiot." And that is what The Dish Pig is all about. This is the first episode. A big thanks to Aaron Aaron Drake out of Los Angeles for our theme song. Brilliant work, mate. I'm incredibly excited to be bringing this podcast to life, where we're going to delve into all things food and booze. You know, food and drink make up a big part of our lives. I know it does for me. And each week, I will talk to guests from all corners of the culinary world, whether it's chefs, restaurateurs, distillers, winemakers, produce growers, bakers, bartenders, brewers, even blokes that sell firewood. And we're going to see what inspires their vision, their products, their service, and creativity. Now, I'm not an expert, but I'm passionate. And we're going to talk to some real experts as we go on a journey of discovery in the food and booze world. So if you want to discover with me, learn, and laugh as we meet the people behind the scenes, this podcast is for you. So this week, I sat down with someone I know very, very well, James Sherry, the co-founder of the independent craft spirit company, Tequila Tromba. So let's jump in. Jim. James Sherry.
That's me.
Full disclosure, we are related.
That's right. Almost my entire life. And definitely in the entirety of your life.
That's true. Older brother by 2 years.
Yep.
What was the last thing you cooked for yourself?
Last thing I cooked for myself. I made some chicken and orzo soup.
Right.
It was bloody delicious, actually.
What's in that? Besides chicken and
orzo.
Oh, this is the one with plenty of ginger, right?
No. That's a different soup. I make a lot of soup. I find that soup's pretty good on a hangover.
Right.
It's very good to freeze. Very easy to get home late at night and heat up some soup. So what was in it? Yeah. I think it was pretty basic. Chicken thighs, leeks, celery, some chicken stock, and a bunch of dill. And you finished off with a bit of lemon too.
Oh, delish.
Oh, it's nice.
Always got to be thighs. You can't go white meat.
Well, that chicken curry soup we've been eating our entire lives is cut up chicken breast.
Yeah, but imagine what it'd be like if it was chicken thighs.
Pretty handy, I'm sure. That recipe calls for a whole chicken. You know that, right?
Did not know that.
Have you ever made soup with a whole chicken?
No.
All right, so I made this pretty old school chicken and vegetable noodle soup last year. It took me like 5 hours to make. It was ridiculous. It's basically like making chicken stock with a whole chicken, removing the chicken, breaking down the sort of boiled chicken, straining all the ingredients out. So you got the stock, shredding up the chicken, and then like boiling more vegetables into the already made chicken stock. It was bloody tasty, but it took forever. But last year we had a lot of time on our hands. So
it's true. Well, we're not really here to talk about soup, are we?
Why not? Soup's great.
Soup is delicious. It is good for the hangover. Bit of chili, bit of ginger, bit of spice, bit of heat.
Yep.
Get the
soup
sweats.
for breakfast is underrated, I think.
Actually, speaking of soup and hangovers, I was in Seoul on a work trip this one time, and the night before, just raging drunk. Lots of beer, lots of soju. Clients took me out. A lot of fun, but I had another client meeting the next day. Well, it was a lunch meeting, but I woke up rather late. terribly, terribly hungover, quite sick, in the stomach, bit nauseous. Was very, very close to calling up the client and saying, look, I can't come, can't make it. It would have been very, very bad form, but I managed to drag myself out of bed, showered, dressed, got to the meeting on time. The restaurant that we were going to go to was closed, so I'm like, so we're like walking around this neighborhood. I'm about to die. Anyway, we find a spot, sit down, and he orders this huge kind of, I don't remember what the dish was called, but it was a huge soup that you could just, the ladles in the middle.
Like a hot pot.
Yeah, like a hot pot, yeah. And by about halfway through eating this soup, it was gone. My hangover was gone. It turned me around.
That's amazing.
It was a lifesaver, literally.
But you don't know what it was.
Don't know what it was. It was vegetarian though. There was no chicken. A lot of mushroom, I think.
Oh, mushrooms.
But anyway, so that's our soup chat. But let's
do you want to have a how hungover have you been at a work meeting chat?
Do you have a lot of those?
So I went to Tales of the Cocktail once. I was going to say, for those of you listening, is anyone going to listen to this?
Nah.
So you know what Tales is?
That's the
booze conference they have every year in New Orleans, but they haven't had it. They're not having it this year. They didn't have it last year, obviously. Anyway, I had a meeting with a guy who ran a sort of small distributor out of the UK. Was up way too late the night before. As Tales goes, you go to a handful of parties and then you should go home, but because the bars are open until 7 in the morning, you go to a couple of bars on the way back to the hotel and play up a bit. But I managed to drag myself out of bed, into the shower, to this meeting. I got to the meeting, it was in the hotel lobby of the guy who's staying there. And I'm there trying to pitch the idea that he should take Tromba to the UK and put it in his portfolio. I threw up before the meeting. I was in the dunnies in the hotel lobby, just yelling at Ralph, right? I'm like, I fucking can't do this. Like, this is not happening.
Were you throwing up soup?
No. I was throwing up probably like hurricanes or the bad shit you get in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so massive. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm not going to make it out of this bathroom, let alone through the meeting. Anyway, managed to bring everything up, got myself out, got myself to the meeting. You'll be not shocked to hear that we didn't end up launching the brand with this guy in the UK, but I got through it okay, and then I immediately, as soon as we shook hands and finished, I immediately went back to the bathroom and threw up again. Bookended.
Classy.
Yeah.
Professional. Very professional.
Mate, Tales of the Cocktail is for an industry conference, is the least professional work thing, I think, on the planet. Full of liquor industry professionals acting totally unprofessionally.
Well, let's take it back a bit.
Yeah.
So you're the co-founder of Tequila Tromba.
I am one of 5 founders. Myself, Nick Reed, who we grew up with, another guy from Melbourne, his college roommate, Eric Brass, guy from Toronto, and Marco and Rodrigo Sedano, who are our production family, father and son distilling team. 5 of us started it.
But how did
With help from others.
With help from others.
Yourself included.
But how, growing up, did you ever expect that you would end up co-founding a tequila brand and that would turn into your professional career?
No. I think that I always sort of had an entrepreneurial brain or spirit or whatever. Like, Tromba's not even the first business I started with Nick. We had a car washing business for a day when we were growing up, like when we were 12 or something. Team Cleanliness was the name of our business.
You and Reedy?
Me and Reedy, we knew these guys who were making a decent amount of money just going door to door, selling their services, washing cars. I'm like, we could do that. So one Saturday we fired up and started our business, and I think we closed it when the footy started later that day because we're like, no, I'm over this. Don't want to do it anymore.
How many cars did you clean?
None. But so the idea of kicking off a business always appealed to me. We had me and you had our little production company for a little while. We were trying to get some gigs. My mate Tom McInerney, we started a little digital real estate advertising.
Oh, yeah, but Blue Boards.
Blue Boards. So yeah, I was definitely going to start something. I'd never really liked working for anyone else. But in the tequila space, to answer your actual question, I had no idea. It's like some of the best things that ever happen, I reckon, in your life is, when opportunity knocks. Mm-hmm. And this particular opportunity just came up. It even came up in a strange way for Reedy, because the same way Reedy sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I've got this idea. Do you want to get involved? I'm like, yeah, for sure. Let's give it a try. That's what happened to him. He was working with some guys in Guadalajara, and they tapped him on the shoulder and said, look, we're going to start this tequila brand. You should be our guy in Australia. So when you go back to Australia, you should take the brand with you and you should, launch it over there. And those guys never followed through. But the idea sort of got into Reedy's head. So he said, well, fuck it. I could do this. I'll call up my Jim. Maybe he's interested. I'll call up Eric. Maybe he's interested. And that's how I got started.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty just not luck, but one thing kind of led to the other, because Nick Reed found himself in Guadalajara purely, he went there on exchange, right?
Right.
With university.
Yep.
Meets a girl, gets married, stays in Mexico, comes back to Australia for a bit. Was it on the return leg where he approached you and said, let's do the tequila business, or was it already?
It was midway through 2008. So we can, you can draw back as far as you want. If we hadn't gone to school together,
Exactly.
If I'd been put in school a year before, we might not have been as good of friends. But if you want to go back to what Nick's experience was, he was definitely weighing up whether to go on exchange to Guadalajara or Sweden.
Sweden?
Yeah. So if he'd gone to Sweden instead, I think Mike Scanlon and Andy Barrett went on that exchange. Mm-hmm. I think they were all talking about it. And Reedy's like, nah, fuck it, I'll check out Mexico instead.
So if you'd gone to Sweden, then you would have started your own, Fernet Branca equivalent?
Canned fish.
Canned fish. What else do they make in Sweden?
Furniture.
Oh, yeah.
Shitty furniture.
IKEA. Meatballs. Well, then, yeah, so he comes to you. He has this idea.
Yeah, that was mid-2008. He'd spoken to those guys he was working with, and he came to me with the idea. We like drinking tequila. He sort of got me onto drinking tequila in the first place when he used to come back from Mexico, from visits to Mexico with sort of weird and wonderful different kinds of tequila in his luggage, and we'd sit around his house in Richmond and drink a bunch.
And
that got me into it. And when he came to me sort of mid 2008, I just got home from a year overseas myself. that was like about 9 months after my first trip to Mexico. And we sort of, kicked it off. Then it was an idea we just continually batted around, and it never went away.
And this would have been, I mean, it's no secret that craft spirits has genuinely exploded, probably all around the world in terms of. I mean, I know here in Australia, here in Melbourne, the amount of local gin brands now and vodkas and even rums. That's like, it seems to have really, really taken off. But back, so this is leading into 2009. Had that really? It hadn't really kicked off yet, right? I mean, there was still a lot of us. I mean, clearly a lot of established, very well known labels that were around and still are around, of course. But I mean, were craft spirits even a thing back then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like the Melbourne Gin Company had been doing it for a while, and like the whiskies out of Tasmania were starting to get a little bit of recognition.
Yeah.
But by sheer availability, I suppose, not heaps. But it was definitely like emerging, and it all emerged on the back of the craft beer movement.
Right.
So, all you have to do is look at the US for a bunch of different trends, and eventually that sort of stuff makes it here to Australia. So, when craft beer started booming in the US, all those initial movers in the craft beer space eventually bought a still and started distilling something. It was usually gin, some whiskies, because like they wanted to sort of capitalize on their own place in the market, where, well, if we can make beer, if we can make these ridiculous, IPAs, overhopped IPAs, maybe we can make a whiskey to go with it. Sort of, that was the argument. And it was the same here when craft beer sort of really started to rise up with sort of Mountain Goat and brands like that to challenge CUB. It was only a matter of time before the spirits came through.
Yeah.
As well. So,
but I guess, I mean, tequila specifically, I mean, that's because anyone could just pick up, buy a still, build a still, put it somewhere, get some ingredients, start making alcohol.
yeah.
But tequila specifically, because there are, and we'll get to that in a bit, but there's a lot of regulations around. I mean, tequila has to come from Jalisco and Mexico. Like, you can't just start making tequila in, someone's backyard in Australia.
Well, you could back then.
Right.
There was no law against it.
In 2009?
Well, there was no law against it that was recognised in Australia. Yeah, I think the law where you couldn't...
Interesting, okay.
You couldn't label something tequila only came into effect, I think, in 2013 maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yep. But, it's always been a law in Mexico, but it's up to the rest of the world to recognise those laws.
Right.
Have we got off the subject? What were you asking me?
No, we were just kind of, starting from the beginning and like how the brand got off the ground.
Yeah. Well, I touched on the trends from the US very briefly, which was, craft beer into craft spirits. And there was a few around back in sort of 2009, but not many. I think 666 vodka really just got started in 2009, maybe started 2010. But not just that trend of the craft beer into craft spirits, which we'd see in the US, which we knew was going to become a thing in Australia. The Mexican food and drink culture and the sort of premiumization of that in America was also pretty evident to us that would be sort of the next hot food and drink trend in Australia. And we were proven right. We started our tequila brand. It it really got started after me and Nick and Eric had sort of kicked around the idea for most of 2009. We really got started when we properly met up with Marco and Rodrigo in Guadalajara in January 2010. We started making tequila that April, and we launched it that September. That same year, in February, Mamacita opened in the Melbourne CBD and just exploded, and just, everyone wanted to go and eat tacos and drink margaritas. It was incredible. So
it kind of
good timing on our part.
It really kind of put, like the Mexican cuisine in Melbourne kind of on the map, right, when Mamacita opened, and then everything that comes with that, especially tequila.
Yeah.
And so you said September 2010, that's at the Sydney Bar Show, right?
Yeah. Sydney Bar Show, September 22nd, 2010. And
it was a bit of a... I mean, I was there helping you guys out at the Sydney Bar Show, but the story of how the tequila actually got into the country and to the bar show, it was, how would you describe it? It was rather turbulent?
Yeah.
Chaotic?
I was thinking you were going to ask me about this. Oh, I was thinking we'd sit down and you'd be like, tell us your best stories from the tequila business or hospitality business adjacent stories, and then I'd start talking and you just listen. So I figured you'd ask me about this because it's the first funny story to come out of our business, probably. Mm-hmm. There's some stories from the Guadalajara trip as well that are pretty good, like when we stayed up for 27 hours in a row. That was pretty funny.
I was just thinking, I actually don't even remember that.
I'll get to that second. Tell the first one first, because it's the funny. I think it's the funniest story, and I think it's the first story, which is why it's funny. So I already mentioned that we started making tequila in April, and we launched it in September. So April, May, June, July, 5 months. We were waiting. It only takes 2 weeks to make a batch of Blanco tequila. So we were waiting 5 months for something that should have taken, even with shipping, maybe 3 months. So we're sitting here for 2 months holding our dicks waiting for fucking this tequila to show up. Meanwhile, we'd invested pretty much everything to date. I don't think we had any money left from the startup funds. And we invested the last of it by buying a booth at the Sydney Bar Show, where we're going to introduce Tromba to Melbourne's, Australia's bar and restaurant community. So we were invested. We were heavily invested. And we were sitting around and we were waiting and we were waiting. And it was getting closer and closer and closer to the date. And this fucking tequila still wasn't showing up. And I'm like, I don't know.
But had it actually been shipped yet, or was it sitting on the ground in Guadalajara?
No, it had been shipped.
Okay, so it's left Mexico.
Yep. And Rodrigo is on the phone all the time to the freight forwarding company who were supposed to be sending us this bloody tequila. After a long and thorough investigation, it turns out the freight forwarding company, our particular, I suppose you call him a customer management, like he was our account manager, so we were his customer. Turns out that guy was running another business, another freight forwarding business within the business that he worked for.
I forgot about that,
and he was
yeah.
pocketing all the money. So he would...
Cheeky.
So he would take clients, us being one of them, not put them on the books of his company that he worked for, and he would just take our money and pocket it. And all he did was just ship stuff out of the country. And he didn't care if it got to the end destination. Turns out our tequila was sitting at the port of Los Angeles for like 2 months. and no one knew it was there. They couldn't find it. So through Rodrigo's persistence, this guy ended up getting found out and he actually went to jail over it. Yeah.
What did he get? You know?
Mexican jail. I couldn't imagine. And we eventually did get that shipment of tequila, but it took, I think, another 2 months after we'd launched. So we're sitting there in Sydney. Well, we're sitting here in Australia with no stock. And Sydney, the bar show is coming up the following week. And we're just like, oh, man, like, we're going to have to pull out. There's nothing here. Like, this is a bloody disaster. But we were so sort of set on launching. We were so eager to get started, to launch the brand. We were like, and we were so, I can't stress enough, we'd invested so much money. We're like, we can't just let this die. So Reedy ends up booking a flight to LA. Rodrigo ends up booking a flight from Guadalajara to LA. So Nick's gone from Melbourne to LA. Rodrigo's gone from Guadalajara to LA. They met up at the airport. Rodrigo bought with him, I think, 3 or 4 six-packs. I think he brought 4 six-packs of Tromba.
From Mexico, or did he actually get it from the port?
No, from Mexico. So he had some still. Remember, he was starting to sort of shop it around Guadalajara to sell to friends.
He kind of had some in reserve there.
Yeah. So he had some in reserve, so he puts that in his bag. And that's another story. You might have to interview him. But Rodrigo tells a story about how he shows up to the airport with 4 cases of tequila. And they're like, what are you doing? You can't bring that. You can't check that. It's like, of course I can check that. You know, there's nothing. I'm going to declare it when I get to the US. There's no reason why I can't bring this. And they're like, no, you can't do it. And he says, well, either you let me do it, or I'm going to go and ask every person in this line. She said, you can only bring 2 bottles. And so I got 4 cases. She's like, you can let me bring it, or I'm going to go ask everyone in this line to carry 2 bottles for me, and I'm going to hold the whole thing up. What are you going to do? So she let him take it. So he meets up with Reedy in the US. They see each other for a couple of hours. I think they hung out in Santa Monica. And so Reedy was there for a day. He got in, he flew in the morning, picked up the tequila, flew out that night. And meanwhile, I think, did you drive up with me? I don't think so. I drove up by myself.
Yeah, no, I think you drove up by yourself.
So I had all the gear in Melbourne, and we packed up Dad's old Land Cruiser, and I drove up by myself.
Because there's a lot of stuff, because the booth entails, there's kind of just like a regular convention, right? Like you set up a stand, you have the printouts of
we just had the
logos and all that.
No, we just had like some floor space. We had to construct a proper booth. So we were doing that while Nick and Rodrigo were meeting up. Me, you, and Lupita were doing that.
Yep.
So...
But there was still no tequila, of course.
No,
so we're
0 tequila. But
setting up a booth that could potentially...
4 Tequila Tromba. The one thing that we didn't have was the bottles of tequila, which you kind of need, I suppose, if you're launching a tequila brand.
Pretty important, I guess.
Yeah. So Reedy's back on the plane. Reedy tells a funny story that he took a sleeping tablet because he's like, I've got to wake up, hit the ground running, because he was going to get back just in time. He was going to get back the morning that the bar show was opening. We'd sort of bumped in the day before, and Reedy was coming in hot with the tequila that morning. We're going to go. He was going to get in at 7. I think the whole thing started at maybe 11, 10 in the morning.
And I guess it's important to note is that at this stage, no one, I mean, Rodrigo must have, but you and Nick had not even tasted the tequila yet.
We hadn't held it in our hands. We hadn't tried the tequila at all. No.
So there was a lot on the line.
It was. We weren't sure if it was going to be any good. Rodrigo and Marco were assuring us it was very good, but we didn't know. So, yeah, we're all set to launch our tequila brand, having never tried it, and setting up a stand that didn't have any tequila. So, Reedy's back on the plane. He pops a sleeping tablet and he goes to sleep. He's like, I'll be ready. soon as I hit the ground running, I'll be rested and I can do the full day's work. And he touches back down. So he reckons he wakes up as soon as the wheels hit the ground, and the captain gets on and is like, welcome to home if you're Australian, and to those visiting, welcome to sunny Brisbane. And like, Brisbane? We're in fucking Brisbane? So it turns out that the Sydney airport was fogged in and they had to land in Brisbane instead. So he's like, he's like, oh, if I fuck this up, like, do I accidentally get on the Brisbane flight instead of the Sydney
plane
flight? So he has to sit on the tarmac in Brisbane for like 2 hours. Eventually getting himself back to Sydney. I reckon he got back to Sydney. I reckon they landed at about 10:30. Meanwhile, the show's starting at 11. So I go to pick him up. Mate, how's it going? Bloody disaster. He's like, whatever. Throws the tequila into the back of the car. You and Lupita have opened the stand.
Yep.
At the Sydney Bar Show.
Doors have opened. People have started to arrive.
What were you telling people?
I think we were just I think we were just saying, our stock is on the way. Like it's been delayed. Come back on your next lap and we'll have some samples ready.
Significantly delayed. Go get a coffee. It's 11. I can't remember why. We must have been going to the hotel. I think we must have had to pick up something from the hotel, but we're driving through King's Cross, I think it's Williams Road that comes up to the old Coke sign or whatever. And we're driving through that way, and Reedy turns to me and goes, we should probably try this fucking tequila. And I'm like, all right. He pulls a bottle out of his bag, opens it up in the car, and he's got 2 like plastic cups. Pours us each a shot. We cheers and we go, have a sip, and we go. And I remember thinking, like, is this pretty good? And Reedy looks at me and goes, this is pretty good, right? He's like, yeah, it's good. I don't remember us going, oh, wow, this is amazing. Oh, they've outdone themselves. This is just the best tequila I've ever tried in my entire life. I remember being so relieved that it wasn't shit.
Yeah.
That was the overriding experience. And then,
that should have been one of the original kind of marketing kind of taglines, like here, drink our tequila. It's at least it's not shit or something.
It's not shit.
It's not shit.
But it was such a relief having gone through all the pains of like starting the business for starters, but then all the pains of getting those initial bottles and boxes to Australia. It was just very much a few kind of moment. So yeah, first ever Tromba I drank, I was actually driving a car while I was doing it, driving through King's Cross in Sydney.
Again, professional.
Very professional.
So that was that was the beginning. Like that was the first time you tasted the juice.
Yep. So then we get to the Sydney Bar Show, we meet up with you guys, and we pour you guys one, and I think you have similar reactions. Like, this is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
This is pretty good. And the
smooth.
The day we spent there, and I met some people that day that I know to this day, guys like Seb Costello and Clinton Hoare and Brian Townsend and Merlin. We talk about that first day a lot because we sort of got to know our own tequila and brand in real time with people that we now still have today as friends. We were sort of drinking it throughout the course of the day, getting to sort of know it, and people were talking to us about it, and we were comparing just drinking experiences of that initial batch of Tromba, and it was a bit of a baptism by fire because we had to like talk to all these people about something that we were learning about that day.
All on the spot, basically.
Very much, and trying to fool them into believing that we knew what we were talking about.
So you're underway. I mean, the juice is in the country. Now you have to sell the stuff.
Yeah.
Now, how the fuck do you do that?
I don't fucking know. I still don't know. 10 years later, here we are. Nah, it's pretty basic. It's just like everything. It's relationships, you know. Who'd we go and sell it to first? Well, we met a few guys, right, at the Sydney Bar Show. The overall experience was a good one, but we've often thought, you know, what were we worried about? Whether we started at the Sydney Bar Show or we started just by walking into a bar in Sydney, it's the same thing. But we sold a few cases. Off the back of that, we met Clint and Brian, who are running Maya Tequila Bar in South Yarra. We met Seb, who was running Knightsbridge Penthouse in Canberra. So we actually sold Seb a case of tequila on the drive back from Sydney.
Oh, so you called in?
We called in to
Canberra on the way back from Sydney.
On the way back and sold him a box, which was pretty cool. But how we got started, well, we went and had a chat to Andy at Movida and Lingy, who was running Movida next door at the time. Start with your mates. And then I was working on Iron Chef at the time as just a production assistant. And one of the contestants, he was running some restaurant in Lorne, but he put me onto this guy, Dylan Hickey was his name. He was running the Toff in town at the time. And not only did he decide to pick it up, he decided to put it in the rail. And they were going through a case a week, and I thought it was the best thing ever.
I do remember actually when they were pouring that there, because that was probably one of the first places you could take friends and kind of, you know, people were slinging the tequila, and I guess probably the first time when you're seeing other people that you don't know drinking the tequila,
right?
And you kind of like, oh shit, like this is starting to kind of get out there. Like this is pretty cool.
Because we got it onto a few back bars, but people had to go in and request it. But if you went into the Toff and you just ordered a tequila, Tromba was what you got.
Yeah.
I think they did 2 cases a week. I think that was what their thing was, and I thought, oh man, if we can keep this up, we're going to be millionaires. But you asked me like how you sell the stuff, and it's like anything, it's selling yourself. You just got to, you know. We just put a couple of bottles in our backpacks and started. Eric did the same thing in Toronto, and we just walked around telling our story, telling Marco's story, and getting people to try it. Once we got people to actually try it, I've only had a couple of experiences where people just put the glass down and said, "No, that's not for me."
But that's purely based on their personal taste for tequila, right? Because, I mean, you've obviously got like you said, like telling your story and selling the story is a big part of the brand, and it obviously helps to have very nice tasting tequila.
Yeah,
but it's where you can kind of stand out from the rest, right? I mean, you see a lot of celebrity tequilas these days, and a lot of their stories is just like, well, it's just someone famous, it's their brand, that's it. But
I love tequila. It was always my dream.
Yeah,
making tequila wasn't my dream. My dream was to play cricket for Australia. And then I turned 12. You know, but it's sort of, you know, passions develop over time. It's introduced me to so many people. The real thing like I've been trying to say, like how you sell it is about selling yourself, and it's about building the relationships. And I think what I've got most out of the whole experience is the relationships I've got or had. You know, there were people I knew for a short amount of time in places like Chicago and Sydney and places I've lived on behalf of the brand who I don't see anymore or hear from anymore. But at the time, you know, I wouldn't trade those relationships at all. Awesome.
And I guess one of the strongest relationships would be with the Sedano family. So Marco Sedano, he's the master distiller.
Yeah.
He brews the juice. I'm not sure if that's the technical terms you use for making tequila, but
it picks the fruit. It goes to Cotties.
It makes the cordial.
Yep.
Because I mean his relationship very strong, very close to him, but him in himself, like his story alone is pretty extraordinary, because you could almost say that he was the one, or at least one of the people solely responsible for bringing premium tequila to the world.
Yeah, he's one of the OG tequila guys. Well, premium tequila guys. Because
Premium tequila, right.
when he sort of started in the industry, he started working for the Gonzalez family, who had a tequila brand called Tres Maguey's. They were effectively the Cuervo of the Highlands.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they made Montezuma, if you remember that one. It used to come in plastic bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible shit. Like, anyway, but that's what it was back in those days. It was, tequila was the working man's drink. It was actually entirely mixto. Everything was mixto in the industry at the time.
And mixto is when it's 50, what is it, 51?
51.
51% Blue Weber agave, and
Yep.
the rest is just like sugarcane, whatever, right? Just all kinds of crap.
Yeah, so there's two main categories for tequila. There's mixto. 51% sugars of the agave had to be present to be able to call it tequila. And the 49% can be anything else. Usually it's, sugarcane distillate or corn distillate, some caramel colorings, sugars, and that sort of thing. And then there's 100% agave, which, as it sounds, is 100% sugars of the blue agave to make the tequila. And then there's sort of subcategories of that based on age. So back in the 70s when Marco got started, it was all about mixto tequila, commodity-based industry. There was nothing really crafty about it. There was like private, like family vintages and things like that, which were of a more premium nature, but they were never released commercially. Similar to when sort of agave spirits got started, they were all community-based. All the mezcals would there was a palenque in every village, and they used to make their own stuff. It wasn't until Cuervo came out in the late 1700s that they started to commercialize it.
So very like kind of just region to region, like like single vineyard in a way, like everyone just had their
Well, they use the term single village
okay.
about mezcal. Anyway, we're getting off the point. Marco entered a burgeoning business. Tequila had been a huge deal for 200 years by the time he came along, but they hadn't really made any significant updates to the offering. It was just different kinds of mixto tequila from different parts of Jalisco mainly. And then so he worked for, like I said, the Gonzalez family, specifically Don Julio Gonzalez, the legend. But Marco reckons that they didn't pay very well, so he quit and he went and did something else. I think he worked at a leather factory or something like that, using his skills as an engineer. But when Don Julio, the man, when he retired, his son took over, and his son convinced Marco to come back and work for him. He said he'd pay him a bit more. So he headed up the factory at Tres Maguey's, and they were still making, what they were making, the way they'd always done it. And Marco was just unsatisfied with, you've met him. He's a very exact person. He's stubborn for sure, but he's very precise in what he wants to do. And I think he's just not satisfied, pumping out the same old shit, right?
Mm.
So he reckons that in 1985, he decided, we have this amazing raw ingredient. Why is it going underutilized in the final product? Simple answer to why was economics, but
You just make more.
it's expensive. Mm-hmm. Agave is expensive. Sugar is cheap. So why don't we just, mixto makes more sense.
Yeah.
But, there's premium whiskey on the market. There's premium cognac. There's some incredible, spirits out there that, aren't cheap. what if there was a tequila, and yeah, it'll cost more to make, but then we can charge more, and it's more of a premium product. This sort of idea started eating away at him, and he took a while trying to convince. Well, he unsuccessfully tried to convince Francisco Gonzalez that it would be a good idea. So, in the true sort of rogue distiller spirit as he is, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. He said, fuck it, I'm just going to do it anyway. So in 1985, they started a 3-year process of experimenting with batches of 100% agave tequila. And what he would do is he would create a batch, taste it, age it, because he wanted to make a reposado initially. So reposado is one of those age categories. We can go through them in a sec if you want. But his reposado is going to be aged 6 months. So you'd age this tequila, you'd try it, don't know, trying to get his process down to make it cost effective. 3 years he did this. And what he used to do is just blend those batches of 100% agave tequila back into the batches of either Tres Maguey's or Montezuma, whatever he was making. So no one will know the difference.
Yeah.
And then he got it to a point where it come off the still, and he was really happy with it. And this time he was going to, properly age a batch of reposado and hopefully bottle it.
So initially he was just trying to master that, because it all starts as a Blanco. So Blanco is just straight off the still.
Yeah. And
then reposado is minimum 6 to 12 months resting.
So a Blanco you can age up to 2 months.
Okay.
At 0 to 2 months, Blanco you can age from 2 to 12 months. Añejo, so reposado means rested. Mm-hmm. So it's just a brief aging period. Añejo means aged. So that's 1 to 3 years, and then everything beyond 3 years is extra añejo.
Right. So he was trying to perfect that Blanco, and then once he did that, it's like, hey, this is it. Now I'm going to put some in barrels.
Put it in barrel, and if I've got this great Blanco tequila, we'll make really good reposado tequila. So 3 years, nearly 3 years this took him. So in 1988, he had this first batch that he was ready to age and then bottle. The only problem was he couldn't find any barrels. They were at capacity at the factory. Like every drop would go into barrels. But he did find some, and it was at the Gonzalez family house, which was across the street from the distillery, which is where Francisco Gonzalez lived when he was in Los Altos. He had a house in Guadalajara, and he had a house in Los Altos, in Totonilco, across the street from the distillery. And there were these 12 barrels just sitting empty in the basement of that house. So what he does is one night, in the middle of the night,
because he was doing this this solo.
He had his crew of guys, but they were all sworn to secrecy. Wasn't telling the bosses, that's for sure. Sorry about that. So he goes in the middle of the night, connects a hose to the storage tank in the distillery, runs it across the street into the basement of the house, fills up those 12 barrels, and lets them sit there for 6 months. In 6 months, he pulls he taps one of the barrels, tastes it. This is it.
Yeah,
I've done it. Fills up a glass, goes upstairs, knocks on Francisco's door. He goes, "Oh, you got to try this. This is awesome." So he gives the glass to Francisco,
to the big boss.
This is Don Julio's son, who had taken over for after Don Julio retired. So Francisco tries the tequila and he freaks out. He's like, "This is amazing." He's like, "Yeah, 100% agave tequila. I told you." Like, this is unbelievable. Who makes this tequila?
Like, whose is it?
Yeah, whose is it? He's like, "Well, it's yours." It's like, "What do you mean?" "Well, we make it." "Oh, this is unbelievable. Where can I get some? Where can I get a bottle, or where can I where can I get some more of this? This is delicious. I said, there's 12 barrels of it downstairs. Anyway, those initial batches became the first batches of the tequila that's now called Don Julio because Marco designed that tequila, that premium 100% agave tequila that ended up being a reposado, that ended up starting the movement towards 100% agave tequila. And Francisco Gonzalez invented the Don Julio brand in honor of his dad, who had just retired. So those first initial batches came out in the late 80s. Patron comes along in the early 90s, and really they changed the game in terms of marketing premium tequila. Unbelievable. And the rest is sort of history.
Because tequila now is, I mean, whiskey's always been the fastest growing spirit pretty much anywhere, right? Or is it shifted a bit? Because tequila's almost taken over, hasn't it?
Fastest growing. I think vodka still outpaces most categories.
Really?
Yeah. Or maybe that's just highest selling. But yeah, for a while, Irish whiskey was really the fastest growing in the global spirits market, and tequila is, if it's not the fastest growing, it's up there. It's grown exponentially since the late 80s, even since we started in 2010. It's just out of control, which is a good thing and a bad thing, you know. It's a bad thing because it's hard to keep up. Agave takes, blue agave that you make tequila from. There's only one specific agave plant you can make tequila from, and it's that one. And it takes, minimum 7 years to fully mature.
Yeah.
So
it's still mind-boggling the time it takes, like you said, for it to mature. But I mean, Jalisco's not a big place.
I mean,
Like-
compared to what?
Well,
Compared to Queensland? Yeah, you're right. It's not.
for the amount of tequila that's being produced, like you just have to think like where the fuck is all this agave
It's a
coming
lot
from?
of agave, yeah. Well, you got to consider the other municipalities as well. Like there's a lot of agave grown in Tamaulipas and Michoacan.
Yeah.
All the most of the distilleries, majority of the distilleries is still in Jalisco.
Right.
But yeah, it is, still a relatively, you're right, it's still a relatively small industry to pump out as much tequila as they do. And when you think about all the big multinational companies that own tequila companies, or tequila brands rather, it is a staple.
Yeah. So what year is it? 2021. So it's 11 years that the brand's been around.
It'll be 11 years in September.
Yep. You'll have to do a little reunion on the road with Reedy, sipping some tequila behind the wheel.
It's hard. It's hard to get those guys to agree on what the birthday is, though.
Really? Well, what's the argument?
Well,
Is it the day of the Sydney Bar Show, or is it?
Well, according to me, it is. Yeah, that's the day I first tried it. That's the day we sold our first bottles of it. But then you talk to Marco and Rodrigo, and it's April of that year because that's when they first started making it.
Yeah.
And you talk to Brass, and it's like, no, our first full year of operation was 2012, and he counts 2012. So
I'll just go with the first date, the earliest one. But how has the brand grown over the last 11 years? Is it where you thought it would be? Is it grown more? Is it?
Well, it's sort of grown the only way we know how to do it. Like it's similar kind of approach than it was 11 years ago. Bottles in the backpack, go around to as many places as you can, talk to people about it, get people to try it. Maybe they'll buy a few bottles. The difference is we've got a lot more people working for us to do that now, and we do it in a lot more places. So, we started out here, or we started out in Mexico, really, selling it to friends and family in Mexico. And then we started out here, and then we launched it in Toronto. Then we went Australia-wide, and then we went nationwide in Canada, and then we launched it in the US in 2014. That's when I moved there. We just started out in the Chicago and Washington, D.C. markets, and then we built it up to 15 states in the US.
So in that, so if you look at 2010, how many cases would you have sold that year of Tromba, you think?
Well, I think the initial run was 10,000 litres.
10,000 litres, okay.
And I think we put down about 1,500 in barrels. So we would have bottled 6,000 litres. Bottled 6,000 litres. Oh, wait a minute. No, I think we put down 2,500 in barrels. Yeah, we would have bottled 7,500 litres, which would have made 10,000 bottles. And I think it took us close to a year to try and sell that.
To get rid of all of those.
Yeah.
And
both in Australia, Mexico, and Canada. Combined. I think it took us a year to sell the first batch, yeah.
So 1 year, 10,000 bottles. We all want to kind of pretend that 2020 didn't happen, but let's just look at 2019. Well, you can look at last year, but flash forward to the last couple of years. What's that number now standing at?
So we probably did 30,000, end of 2019, we probably did 30,000 9-litre cases.
30,000 9-litre cases?
Yeah. So that's 360,000 bottles.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Not bad.
It's a lot of tequila.
Good size. Not bad.
What's your go-to cocktail with tequila?
I love a Paloma.
What's in a Paloma?
Tequila, lime, grapefruit soda, salt. Done.
Delicious.
It's an old cantina drink from the town of Tequila. It's just easy. It's just simple. The best cocktails are the simple ones. I like a tricked out tiki drink as much as the next person, but I've had Palomas in some of the fanciest cocktail bars on the planet, and I've made them for friends in the car park of a 7-Eleven. It's pretty awesome, and it's really refreshing, and you can drink a few of them. I love a margarita. I really do, but I can have maybe one a week or maybe 2 a month.
Just the acid just starts to attack.
I just get heartburn looking at them.
Oof.
But Palomas, I'm happy to sip on all day. It's a really good drink.
Actually, speaking, we do have some Tromba here that we're going to just sip on while we chat away and maybe close out things.
Okay. Close out with a drink.
What do we got here?
This is the only bottle that I managed to find in the house earlier. It's a bottle of the Reposado. It's probably a batch we made last year.
Delicious.
I like the Reposado. I think it makes our best margarita too. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
This will make me feel better.
Just warms the soul.
It's very good. And yeah, I think it makes our best marg for sure. There's something about the oak flavouring on the Reposado that just plays really nicely with the sort of acid of the lime. So that Reposado is aged for it's 6 to 8 months. They usually age the batches of Reposado, and they're all aged
in old whiskey barrels, right?
Ex-Jack Daniels barrels.
Ex-Jack Daniels barrels.
Yep.
And then what does the future look like for Tromba? I mean, I know earlier we were talking about trends from the US that kind of make their way to Australia, and I mean a huge trend that we've been noticing is hard seltzers, right? That all the big beer labels are doing them in the US.
Yep.
They're starting to creep in here. Canned cocktails have become a huge thing. Is that something that's the kind of future of the brand?
Yeah, I think that the future of the brand, I mean, we've done a lot in bars and restaurants. I'm really lucky to have drunk Tromba in some of the best bars and restaurants in the world, right? I think I told you this story. Like, I've been to 11 Madison. Hey, you've been to 11 Madison Park, right?
I have, yeah.
Widely regarded as the best restaurant. Well, won one of those best restaurant in the world awards a few years back.
I believe it's it was number one. Was it 2 years back, 3 years back, and then it dropped to number two? Yeah, I mean it's
Incredible joint.
It's up there.
Yeah. So I like telling people I've been there for a drink. Because Heather Ash, who was our first brand ambassador in New York, she was awesome. She really got us motoring in New York. She got it into there, and that was one of the more satisfying glasses of Tromba I ever had, was sitting up at the bar at 11 Madison Park and having a Tromba near her. That was really cool. So there's 11 Madison Park it's not many, like, there's not much further to go when it comes to bars and restaurants when you'll be able to do that. Like, the verdict is in by the global bar community. They really do like our tequila, and that's awesome because we've spent 10 years getting to that point where we're accepted.
Well, that was the whole strategy, right? Rather than just spending a whole bunch of money on marketing and going straight to like a consumer at home, it was speaking to the bars, speaking to the bartenders, speaking to restaurateurs, and getting the industry on side, building it from the inside, and then they would then pass that on to the average punter, right?
Yeah, I mean, the hospitality industry is good that way. I think you can do something on a shoestring budget like we've done, as long as the product's good. Like, people have a general consensus about a product. And then there's other products that come in to the market, not just tequila, and they do really well because they spend a lot of money, but that's fleeting. It doesn't last. As soon as the checks stop coming, people stop caring about certain brands. Yeah, we never had any money to spend anyway, but our entire marketing budget was my bar tab, basically, and even sometimes I didn't pay those. Like I said, bars and restaurants will do that forever. That's a cornerstone of our business, and it's something like we really know how to do it too, which is good. We know how to present our brand to the opinion leaders in the liquor industry, and for the most part, we've got a good level of acceptance from them. So I think what's next is the things that we don't know how to do. We are Australia's most popular premium tequila in bars and restaurants. It's a fact. No one barely comes close to what we're doing. But we can't get Vintage Cellars and Dan Murphy's to care. Like, we can't get them on side to help us push our tequila into home bars, into people's hands to make margaritas at home, things like that. So I think that's the next big challenge, is to market the brand a bit more effectively to just general punters. And
that's purely based on volume, right? Like, it's not generating enough, like there's not enough volume being sold to someone that's going to take it home, rather than someone that's sitting in a bar or sitting in a restaurant that's ordering it off the list.
Right. Yeah, well, it's not a volume problem per se. Like, we sell a good amount of tequila through Dan Murphy's, for example. I think they're probably our biggest customer. Like, I think they do 30 cases a month or something like that, which is good stuff.
Right.
What we want to do, though, is go do like 300 a month to really get the home bartenders really loving our brand and loving tequila as much as we do. Is why we started the brand in the first place, was to get as many people as we could to drink better tequila. We've done that in bars and restaurants. Let's try and do that at barbecues.
Because that was one of the, even going back to the Sydney Bar Show and pouring a sample to someone, I mean, there were a lot of, bar enthusiasts and drinkers there. But if you're speaking to like some of your mates or family and friends and like, here, try this tequila, like, oh, no, I had an awful experience on tequila when I was in uni or college or, it's because they were drinking shit.
Right.
That was almost like one of the first hurdles to get over with people.
Massively. And people still feel that way sometimes. More and more people have gotten over it. I was talking to Matt, our cousin Matt, yesterday. He's like one of my first victims. We were talking about, we went...
In a good way.
In a good way. It wasn't even Tromba. We hadn't even launched. I think I had a bottle of Don Julio or something. And he was over for dinner at Mum's. I'm like, oh, you got to try this. And we just had a long chat, and the glass kept getting refilled. And because he's like, I can't do this. Like, this is not me. Like, I had that bad experience. I was like, no, you got to try something different. You got to try something of a higher quality. It's all about drinking better and drinking less rather than, the cheap and nasty tequila shots we used to do. And he reminded me of it yesterday. He's like, yeah, I love tequila. He loves it now. Absolutely spoons it up. And I didn't know it at the time, but him being one of the first people I convinced to try and, drink better, to try and drink good tequila. I didn't realize I'd be doing that for the next, 12 years. But that's basically what I've been doing. And coming back to what's next, that's what I want to do on sort of a larger scale. I just got to figure out how to do that. Whether it's through, things like this, online, creating some content based around tequila or, doing some, digital advertising campaigns. We're going to launch our own direct-to-consumer website where it's going to be part tequila store, part, merch, or some sort of limited edition merch for the brand. Maybe we'll get people excited because we bring out a fucking awesome T-shirt and maybe they'll buy tequila.
Apparel.
Maybe. And maybe they'll buy a bottle of tequila when they get it. Like, oh, I love that. I want to buy one of those. Oh, I guess there's a tequila company too. All right, I'll try one of their margarita kits or something like that. So yeah, that's the big challenge. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you remember that Simon Sinek? I can't remember. Law of diffusion of innovation. I think it's what it is, and it's like the society goes on a curve, and you sort of, if you can picture a curve, the first sort of 15%. People just understand what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's like those are the people who line up to get iPhones. Like, I'm just having that.
Yeah.
Like, that's me. I get it. I want it. And I don't care how expensive it is, what hurdles I have to get. I'm just having that. So, same as with tequila. You'll get the first 15% just by showing up because people understand the value of premium tequila. They understand the value of craft spirits. They want to try something different because they like what it says about themselves as much as it says about you who's offering me the tequila. And then it's the next sort of 15 to 20% of people that you got to really put the work into to try and convince. And then if you convince them, then the next 20% of people will take notice of them, right?
Yeah.
And sooner or later, you've got, say, 75% of the market. The bottom 25% are the people who will never, ever drink tequila, so you don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to get those people. It's hard to reach the tipping point. But what we've been good at over the years is working hard and trying different things. And that's what we're going to do.
And I mean, like, because a big part...
That and RTDs, I forgot to mention. So you asked me about the hard seltzer and things like that, and it's undeniable, things like White Claw and shit like that, that, again, we got to at least try to see if we can capture some sort of interest in our brand through those mediums. So we released a tequila and soda in Canada last year, and it went really well. We've collaborated with a local company here in Melbourne to create margaritas in a can. by collaborate, I mean we just sold them some tequila. They made the whole thing, and they've done a really good job. It's blowing up. So this year we'll bring out a few more canned products. We'll try a few different things to get eyes on the brand and follow through on retail. We'll do some direct to consumer stuff, all the while maintaining what we do best, which is work it in bars and restaurants.
Awesome. Well,
how was that?
Before you go,
favorite
bar in the whole wide world?
El Gallo Altanero, Calle Marcela, Colonia Americana, Guadalajara.
That is a good bar.
Upstairs from the Fitzroy Espresso Bar.
Very good bar.
Yep. Shout out to Alejandra, who makes the best tequila soda in the game. She hates when I say shit like that. I hope she listens to this one day. Basically, they change the cocktail menu there every day based on what fresh ingredients they get from the market. This incredible produce market they have in Guadalajara. And when I go in there and she shows me the new menu and then I order a tequila soda from her anyway, she gets pretty pissed off. And I'm like, mate, you're so good at making these. These are amazing.
Actually, one of the best things about that bar, I can be very particular about things sometimes. The straws, how like there's a like the cardboard paper straw has like taken over for environmental reasons. It's great. It should be happening.
Yeah.
They're made of avocado skins, right?
Avocado skins or pits? Yeah, maybe.
It was skins.
Yeah, probably skins makes more sense.
And they don't go soggy.
No, they're awesome.
Fucking fantastic.
And you know what? They're making them from agave now too.
Ah, excellent.
Agave straws, because the agave, what you use to, the fibers of agave after you've pressed them to create tequila, they're very fibrous, and then you can pulp them and turn them into paper. And someone's gone, oh, well, fuck paper straws. You should do agave straws. Going nuts. Chicago's got some awesome places.
Good drinking city.
Mate. Ever take you to Richard's Bar? Some of my favorite, by the way, some of my favorite bars in Chicago don't have Tromba in them. So Richard's Bar, the Chip In, Archie's. Oh, there are some great shitholes in Chicago. But then there's some awesome ones that have Tromba. Places like Sportsman's Club is an awesome bar. I loved it when we got Tromba into the Dresden in LA.
Oh yeah,
that was some of the best shit ever. I took we were talking about it the other day. I took Tommy there.
Yeah.
Me and Elsie and Roger got shit-faced there on Tromba one night. It was really fun. Took a couple of Tromba investors there that thought it was just the best thing ever, seeing Marty and Elaine and drinking Tromba. It was very cool.
That's fantastic.
And then on the more modern side, like Thunderbolt, the guy, what Cap Ferry's doing at Thunderbolt's really cool.
Good bar.
And
good bar.
We can't not mention some of the homegrown favourites. So
the Lincoln.
The Hotel Lincoln is my favourite pub, hands down.
Yep.
That's why you and I are probably sounding a bit dusty because we were there last night.
Correct.
And Bad Frankie Bar. Have you ever been there?
Bad Frankie, yes. Not for a long time, actually.
I think I'm going to go there tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because what Seb's done there, talk about craft spirits. So
we've got to get Seb on the pod, I think.
We should. So this is the same, I've mentioned it a few times. This is the same Seb Costello who bought this first case of Tromba in Australia / the world. And we're having a chat. We're out front of the Kodiak Club. And we're having a chat. He's like, I've got this idea. We're going to open a bar that sells exclusively Australian-made spirits, beer and wine. And I'm like, I get the beer and wine, mate, but spirits? Like, you're going to have like 9 things on your back bar. He's like, yeah, but that's okay. And we'll get you guys in too because, you're technically Australian because you're Australian-owned, but you'll be the only foreign-made product in the bar. I'm like, awesome. So you have 10 things on the back bar. I'm not sure if you've been there recently. He's got like probably 300 products on the back bar.
Wow.
Now. Like the amount of distilleries that were in operation when he opened that bar in Australia was 13. Now there's over 60.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And he saw it. He saw the trend of the local spirits and smashed it. He's the authority on Australian craft spirits in Australia because he was the guy that decided to not start a brand like me, but champion other people's brands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will go there tonight. Really looking forward to it. Probably my favourite bar in Melbourne, as far as small bars go.
Ripper. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the Dish Pig. This has been great.
Why do you call it the Dish Pig?
It's called the Dish Pig because for a couple of years I worked as a dish pig in a restaurant.
Yep.
And it can be one of the worst jobs you'll ever have, but also one of the most rewarding jobs you'll ever have. There's attention to detail and hard work and that kind of thing that it is drilled into you that I think you just carry with you forever. All right, Jim, thanks very much.
Thank
and
you.
See you soon.